they're making the reference of separating Egypt from Africa. The concept is the conquest of Egypt as a political jurisdiction in the modern day on the continent of Africa, as you see on the maps today. Actually, what they're referring to when they talk about separating Egypt from Africa, they're talking about Iberia and North, Central, and South America, which is actually Hikupta or Egypt, the Egyptian Empire, etc. And so people's minds usually go to just the pyramids or juntas or that you see in books or in stories, etc., on the continent of Africa as it is geographically spoken of today, and it never dawns on them that the series of pyramids exist all over the world, and in numbers, and in fact, you have more pyramids actually on the American continent than probably most of the Africa's on the other side. But people, when they're often looking at the geography, their concept does not ride with the fact that North, Central, South America and the islands is still Egypt. Of course, when you get into your literary structures, say past mid 1800s and back, you'll hear in a lot of written forms North America, and particularly the central part of Kentucky, Tennessee area, as Lower Egypt, etc. That's not uncommon, but you won't hear them talking that way today because the politics constructs that the descendants of the land should be disinherited. And so the concept of separating Egypt from Africa in the minds of the people is limited to the other side when it's actually talking about most of the civilized world, and particularly North, Central, South America. Now, as far as the water is concerned, on another reason why we're talking about the land, because people, for the most part, don't look at land in relationship to hereditament, corporal and incorporeal. As a matter of fact, most people's minds never even go there. So the priesthood, when the after Napoleon Wars against Africa, etc., they took over actually the Vatican, etc., which most people in modern days don't know is African. Their concepts have been that the Vatican's origin is with the hybrid Germanic tribes, when in fact it was not and is not. It was actually taken over. And the same structures of the Vatican, etc., you will find the same geographical and architectural structures in Timbuktu, etc. So when the people see the Vatican in Iberia, their concepts have been, according to Rockefeller instructions, that is hybrid Europeans. And many of our people don't know that when you're talking African history, you're talking Iberia too. So there's a mental disconnect. So the reclaiming of that which is the inherited right of the Picts and the Moors, etc., is indeed also the Vatican. So you have actually, in the modern contemporary world, where hybrid Germanic tribes have actually taken over the lands and the estates and the hereditaments of the Moors and have been claiming to be Moors. This is where you see, like in the Bible, as an example, in John 8:44, when the anthropomorphic Jesus says to the hybrids, say that if you were Abraham's children, you claim to be Abraham's children, yet if you were Abraham's children, you would do the works of Abraham, but you seek to kill me, a man who is telling you the truth. And then he goes on to say that you are of your father the devil, and the lust of your father ye will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and abides not in the truth. And when he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own kind. And this is also where the designation of the hybrid Germanic tribes taking over the Moabite, Canaanite, Chaldean territories, etc., is used or promoted to separate in such a way that it separates the real heirs from the land, and then they put them in a political jurisdiction referred to as the Holy See. Now, the Holy See would be spelled SEE. And of course, you also know that the C is SEA. So the CSEA, dealing with the waters, implies the parting of the Red Sea by Musa, or by uh, the rulers of the high house of ancient Hykupta. And so the rulers of the high house will be referred to as the Ptah or the pharaohs, etc. And so this is where the hybrid German tribes are trying to kill off the Sabians or Saba, and they cover that up with the word or the term Jew. And this is where Jesus is talking about them claiming to be Jews and are not Jews that you see. But if you don't know the history, you wouldn't know the layered meanings of that phrase and what it's really telling you. Now, the many men and women who belong to many of the secret societies that operate at Midgard. Some of them would be, say, like Knights of Malta, Kyklos, Ku Klux Klan, White Camellia, P2 Masons, Illuminati, Thule Society, etc., etc. This is why all and many of them in their chambers of secret transfers of information and knowledge of the disciplines of humanity and the walks of men will wear the Moorish fez, which is the crown, or what is called corona sol, which means crown of the sun. And of course, you have the geometric science or construction of the fez, where you see the four sets of holes or perforations at the top of it in a circle, with perforations of three sets of perforations surrounding the center. And you'll see perforations of 9, perforations of 12, and perforations of 18 wrapped one after the other in four corners. And of course, that's Yahweh, or earth, air, fire, and water. It's also the four gates of the earth. It's also the north, or the compass, how the compass and square is used to do radii and geometry. And then you have the umbilical cord, or the finial, in the center with a cord, and then you have the ball wrapped with strings, and they're dyed in ebony, and that would be the tassel, and that would represent the center of the universe, or the Earth center, and its rotation around the sun, and the tassels represent the degrees of the Earth in the spiral after the sun, or they say dancing around the sun, and this is degrees, and this is where you get day. So day, the word day comes from degrees. And as the earth dances or spirals behind the sun, you have in its rotationary movement, the dark, or the day, and the light. And so the ephemeris and your calendars, or your cycle placements, etc., that makes up what you call calendars, are generated or calculated by the study of the geometry of the position of the earth in its cycle spiraling behind the sun, where people will say the earth goes around the sun when actually it spirals behind the sun. And as the earth is spiraling behind the sun, the moon spirals around the earth sequentially in a rotation, whereas one side of the moon always shows to the earth. And so then you have, from that rotational calculation, what is known as the lunar calendar. And so basically, the calendars that are used to govern operations at Midgard are bicameral. in fact. And so the calendar systems are actually based on the sun, the movement of the sun and the moon. And so, and then you have in different areas of the of Midgard or the earth, you will see different peoples based on their positions on the earth that have practiced in some areas more leaning to the lunar calendar, and in some in your more modern or contemporary operations, making the people only aware of the sun or solar calendar, when actually the operations are bicameral. And so you must also recognize that the priesthood, in order to maintain their corruption, will not tell the general public this, while they use this knowledge for their personal selves. And so when our people are seeking to go back to the principles of our ancient mothers and fathers and study African culture, they must be aware of the lunar calendar as well as the solar calendar, and also recognize that when you're looking at ancient Egypt, etc., you're looking at ancient America. And so, in order to cut the people's knowledge off of ancient America, they will not tell the people that America is ancient Egypt, and not just on the other side. Those are connected, and that the soil of the Gulf of Mexico and of the land of flowers that you call Florida, etc., and the coast of Carolina, North, Central, or South Georgia, etc. Those areas are the soil is identical, absolutely identical to the soils of North Africa on the other side. Um, so they don't want people to know that there was a connection before the great shift, or the great cocoa plate shift, or what they call in the reconstructed history as the continental drift. Because one of the things that they want to constantly promote is to mentally separate the Africans from Africa, Asia soul, because they're splitting the people, or what you call projecting schismata, in order to maintain unum sanctum conquest operations. So, from a political perspective, the divisions that you see among African people is actually promoted by the priesthood under the unum sanctum operations. And so, this is again why most politicians and priesthood, whether they claim Judaism, whether they claim Islam, or whether they claim Christianity, will promote under the pretext that America is separate from Africa. And most of them are networked, and people aren't aware that what they've been looking at as their so-called priesthood are actually directly in a brotherhood connection with the politicians, and that the politicians also are priests. And this is why you see, once you start doing a little research, whether you're dealing with the hybrid Europeans, or you're dealing with the or Aboriginal Europeans, etc., you will see certain correlations in what they would refer to as, the Grand Lodge of England, London, etc., Europeans in their fraternal orders, and also what you call Prince Hall Masons of people of African descent, being made subordinate by charter under the hybrid Europeans, and yet all of them are wearing Moorish fezzes, and then pretending that they don't know who the Moors are. And whenever they make reference to the Moors, the founders of civilization, in a public forum, they will always call them black, or they'll call us Indians, etc. Now, when they make reference to the Moors as Indians, understand they're talking about the Naga, or the high priest order coming from ancient Eritrea, where your first churches were. They'll tell the people that the first churches, etc., was in Abyssinia, or what you call Ethiopia. Ethiopia, but actually your first churches were in Eritrea, and you'll find that in your Bible, in the book in Acts, for those who doubt what I just now said to you. And of course, church does not mean the building in the sense that the people have been told. Church actually comes from the ancient Sanskrit or Samskrita. They'll say it's Sanskrit, which is church, which is the great circle, which is really the zodiac, which is also commonly referred to as the geometric calculations and workings of Isis and Horus, or the study of Isis and Horus in the nature of the beings on the planet, and the founding of civilization and the walk of man, also referred to as mother and son, also referred as masonry in the modern world. And so one of the reasons why the priesthood also promote a negative view of mother and son study or masonry is because they don't want the people to look at it objectively and find out that the priesthood have actually been lying to the people, and that the demonology that humanity has been suffering from didn't come from some mystical devil. It actually came from the corrupt and organized priesthood, irregardless of what versions they claim. And of course, this dirtiness and corruption, by virtue of fact and by default, logically plays out in the political realm. And so by the masses not knowing that the politicians are priests, because they're not told that, they think these are separate and different categories of men doing different stuff. And so therefore the people have what you call limited defense, because as soon as one of the dark priests says Jesus, God, Allah, Moses, Muhammad, Yahweh, Jehovah, the people get starry-eyed and give them their lunch money. And they've been getting over with this for quite some time. And now the anthropomorphic projection story of this operations of the dark priesthood is represented by Jesus, even at the age of 12. So 12 is really your 12 constellations, etc. And also referred to as the 12 tribes of Isis, Amen Ra, Elohim, or Israel. Um, with the disconnection of Egypt from Africa, this is a mental thing, not a factual thing. So this is why they will not teach you of Amalek. Also, pardon me, Amalek, and even in your modern maps where you see Amalek is not on the maps. And then people who in your linguistic transliterations, and as your linguistic forms change, when they hear Allah, they don't make the relationship to Amalek. So Amalek is also not only land area, but one of the first names that are used in your earliest religious forms for what you call the divine creative forces, etc., or what you call God. Not just Chodam or Kodam, it's Amalek. So that'll give you something to look at to have a better insight on, again, why we're talking about land. Because Amalek is also part of land that they've been hiding from you. So when people think Amalek, they're thinking the area you call around the area of Saudi Arabia, Yemen, is the artificial Israel today, Palestine, etc., Canaan, etc. So they were talking about all these places in Jerusalem, or what you call Jerusalem, and it never dawns on you Amalek. Also, doesn't dawn on the people why the hybrid Europeans have, over periods of the last couple of centuries, have actually disassembled and reassembled obelisks around the world, particularly where they had taken over both the trade routes and of the Moors, and also as a symbol of conquest. This is also why you see the obelisk at Alexandria, Washington district, for the seat of Rome in the North Gate, etc. And also where you'll see they'll have an obelisk in London, etc., and different places strategically as a symbol of conquering Amalek, or conquering the Canaanite Chaldean, Eritrean, Sabian, Moors, collectively known as Moors. This would deal with all of your African families who are the founders of civilization. And so they're claiming the estate of the true people or Aboriginal people of the world. And this is basically expressed under their unum sanctum operations or their unum sanctum dark church bulla. So that's your dark side. And in order to make you reject yourself, as an example, you will see the insignia of the ancient Canaanite Moabite nation known as the isonomy symbol of the equilateral pyramid with the 120-degree triple angles, etc. And then you'll see the eye separated from the base, and you'll see them, the hybrids, place that on the priesthood debt note that they created, known as the Federal Reserve note. And so that I is actually would deal with the ancient Amalek or ancient Eritrea, Ethiopia, which means the people of the eye. And of course, by the consciousness of the people now being divided, so Ethiopia it also implies that they have divided the consciousness of the people. So you'll see the eye separated on the pyramid on the debt note where the priest or dark priesthood of Midgard have claimed the rights of all humanity, etc. But yet when you do the research into ancient Africa, Central America, South America, where you'll see in stone all over the place, you will not see the people of the eye separated from the base of the pyramid.
Interesting. In the Bible, they talk about the fact that the Amalekites were not mentioned in the Genesis 10 table of nations, but they're referred to as, quote unquote, first among the nations.
So Amalekites are Amalek.
That's what I'm saying.
That's
what I'm saying. But they're not referred to in the Genesis 10 table of nations, but they are called the first among nations. So
now here we go. Now this is, a lot of times, one of the reasons I wanted to read chapter 8 of the Sikh Silent Brotherhood, because it really tells you about the corruption of the priesthood. That's what that chapter is about. And also, this is basically where Jesus is really calling them a fraud. And whereas, like, say, when they talk about the Jesus and the injustice done and the sacrifice of Jesus, the Lamb, etc., the people's concepts is, oh, the devil did this to the good Jesus. And they keep projecting that so that the people don't pay attention to, but a child can recognize it. That it wasn't some mystical devil that did this. It was the priesthood. See, but the priesthood have made this practice. Look at the devil over there. And the devil did this. And the devil did that. And it's the priesthood that murdered all the prophets. It is the priesthood that tortured the women and took their estates for the church. It is the priesthood that murdered women, indigenous women here on this side of Africa, in all the cities called Salam. And they call them witches of Salam. They even people travel from around the world to New Jersey, Shakyabi, that's Shakyabi territory, to even look at a tree that they preserved where they hung a lot of women. Oh, yeah. That's why. And we have many cities in the north, also in Massachusetts, different places. And this is where they did mass murders and tortures of women. And so people here don't know that the wealth of the Constantine order that they call the church today, which is really Constantinians, actually come from the murdering of Aboriginal women. Because in African culture, as you already know, the inheritance is passed down through a matriarchy, through the woman. This is why, like, if you study African people here, and you start when you go into the tribal garbs, whether you go on that side or you go on this side, you'll see the headdress is always dressed with silver, coins and gold coins, and jewels. Even when they do the matrimony, you'll see the crescent style in the headdress, representing the crescent moon that controls the womb, and the sun, etc. And you'll see a commonality on both sides. All you need to do is start examining actually the culture and the customs, and you'll see the relativity on both sides. This is again why, particularly in the North or in North America, that they disallow the people to actually study cultural dress customs because they would recognize the correlation.
Proverbs 31, we always talk about, the Proverbs 31 woman, but in Proverbs 31 verse, the famous line is, who can find a virtuous woman? But 31 verse, what is it? Verse 16, she considereth a field and buyeth it. With the fruit of her hands, she planted a vineyard. She, says she girdeth her loin with strength and strengthened her arms. It says her husband, when you get down to the end, it says that basically her husband is at the gate with the other ones marveling over what the woman says, but the woman buys the field. The woman owns the land.
Now, let's look at this. Let's look at this. Hereditament. Her. Inheritances.
Her.
Yes.
Yeah.
Heritage. It's even in the language.
Right.
But again, we've been made biased by the priesthood because the priesthood is rooted in the dominance of the patriarchy, which conquered the Moors. So this is why the priesthood, as we talked about before, and which is obvious, is evidence for all to see, why there's always controversy. Who are the body? Who's the political body claiming to be spiritual that always condemns women relative to any what you would call hereditament instruction, or any what you call Gnostic philosophy, dispensation, or what you call priesthood? It comes from the Vatican of the Constantine order. And so you'll see the sons or the men who follow Constantine always push the feminine principle out of the priesthood. Why? Because that's the root of spiritual governance. When divinely it comes to woman, it's not to reject the sons. We're talking about the workings of nature.
Right.
And so people have trusted the priesthood to actually guide them, when actually the priesthood is absolutely and extremely and corrupt. Now, who are the greatest supporters of the priesthood?
Women.
There you go. Now that's why they're entrenched. Because they still govern. See, whatever women determine, that's what society is going to be.
Women will start a church and put a man in charge.
Even if they have, say, a lodge, right? Where ancient African cultures is maintained, say Eastern Star, etc., something like that. They will have a man who will be actually the ruler of the lodge of those women. Where do you think that tradition come from? Conquest, unum sanctum conquest. You see, now in true African culture, like say the sons, say we're projective, right? So just like the sun, so you have the masculine energy and the feminine energy that's balanced in nature. So the energies of the planet are given what you call masculine and feminine form. So the sun being projective is given the sun or the designation of the masculine, and this is where they say the son of God, given a masculine tendency, right? And the moon, a woman, you see, being receptive, etc. And so there's a balance, if you get the point. Now, you know that that's anthropomorphic in its nature, but all creative things are actually in the nature of the womb. So all things come through the gates of heaven only through the womb. This is why, like in ancient Central South America, you will have the sistrum or the ankh, and also on that side you also have the ankh. So the ankh is a geometric construction of the uterus, the fallopian tubes, and the birth canal. So that is that is a geometric construction of the Holy Cross, or the cross of the Son that brings life. See, so you have, and even when you deal with the great circle for instruction, the church is designed like that. And so the uterus would be the rostrum, and you would have what is called a cinquefoil window constructed, and that would be above or behind the rostrum. When the sun shines, it would also do what you would call a cycle position or cycle placement, and it's actually a clock. And the rostrum will be the reference point. And then on both sides you would have the pews, those are the fallopian tubes. And then the aisle is the birth canal. This is why most of the time when you see the old churches, if they didn't dress the doors or the gateway, and they usually would never be a single door, would usually be a double door. So that would represent the masculine and feminine side.
It is also the opening,
yes,
if you will, because I was just on a show where we talked about that, and the vestibule, they would call the vestibule, was also significant of Vesica Pisces.
Yes.
The ithacus that many Christians ride around on the back of the cars to signify they're Christians actually is the sign of the uterus or the womb, the opening.
Of course. And this is also why very often if they don't use say if they don't use what you call valuable or what you call precious woods for the construction of the doors, if there's ordinary woods, according to how elaborate they make the great circle or the church, right? And understand the church is the cross.
Right.
The church is not the building. The church is the cross.